Κυρίες και κύριοι, λάβετε θέσεις παρακαλώ για να αρχίσουμε. Παρακαλώ την προσοχή σας. Καλημέρα σε όλους. Dear President, Mr. Schulz, dear members of the European Parliament, esteemed ministers, dear members of the Greek National Parliament, Your Excellencies, dear ambassadors, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this international conference on South for Growth. It is a great honor for us to have the President of the European Parliament, Mr. Martin Schulz, as the keynote speaker today to the South for Growth event. Likewise, we are honored by the participation of the Minister for Development, Mr. Kostis Hatzidakis, Mrs. Bakoyanni, and other personalities here I'm pleased to see with us today. I would like to sincerely thank my colleagues, the heads and press officers of the European Parliament information offices in Cyprus, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Ireland for their collaboration in the organization of this international conference. Special thanks are also due to my people, to the entire team of the office in Athens for the hard work and dedication they put into the conference preparatory work. Our primary goal in conceiving and organizing this event was to initiate and facilitate a meaningful debate on the policies that need to be adopted by the European Union and the member states in order to overcome the crisis which has afflicted the European countries, economies and societies since 2008, and in particular the countries of the European South and Ireland. In this light, it becomes evident that the adoption of South for Growth as a title of this conference does not aim to establish a cluster within the European Union. On the contrary, we believe that the highlighting the special context of the South and the distinct challenges it is facing, we're aiming at boosting the debate and the exchange of ideas and views in order to improve the understanding of the crisis and solutions based on a real European solidarity. Besides, it should be clear by now that as important as it is for the South to stabilize its economy and return to growth, it is equally as important for the North of Europe to be part of a healthy political and economic union. Therefore, it is the collective responsibility of the European Union and the respective national governments to come up with comprehensive, inclusive solutions that will put the entire continent back to the path of recovery. The President of the European Parliament himself, Mr. Martin Schulz, has on a number of occasions stressed out that austerity is not the only way. In fact, it is becoming increasingly evident that it is debatable whether it was a sound policy choice to begin with. In this regard, under the leadership of the President, the Economic Affairs Committee of the European Parliament has launched an inquiry on the effects of Troika-inspired policies in the countries of the European South. This is indeed an immensely significant political initiative that will hopefully lead to a better understanding of the situation in the affected countries that could prompt the reversal of potentially unproductive policies. It cannot be stressed enough, though, that Europe needs to emerge stronger from this challenge. Despite the current wave of Euroscepticism and the growing doubt towards the European institutions, the Union must not falter. From the onset of the crisis, the obvious solution would have been a more integrated structure, the strengthening of federalist sentiment and the establishment of a financial and banking union. The European Parliament has been essential in this regard, as the most representational of all European institutions has not stopped producing legislation and policies in the direction of a stronger European Union. With these thoughts, Mr. President, dear guests, I will now leave the podium to my colleague and friend, the press officer of the EPO Athens, Mr. Kostas Tsoutsoplidis, who has worked very hard for the realization of this event, and it was his original idea that led to the organization of this conference. And I will leave him to present the specific content, structure, and objectives. Thank you very much for your attention.
Welcome to Athens, welcome to the South for Growth event. The idea was born quite some time ago, actually in the darkest hours of the crisis, when we could see by measure and by feeling that Greek citizens felt alone and sometimes let down. Many months later, and as a result of the hard work of colleagues in Brussels, in Nicosia, in Rome, in Dublin, in Lisbon, in Madrid, in Barcelona, and in Athens, this is becoming a reality today. We thank all who have contributed wholeheartedly. South for Growth is about seeking a positive answer to the crisis. Greece, Cyprus, Italy, Ireland, Portugal, and Spain look forward, focusing on growth. South for Growth underlines the political nature of the European Parliament. Today's event is the answer to the caricature of a European Union that is Brussels and has a tunnel vision on austerity. Today's event is a platform where the opinions of elected members of the European Parliament with completely and varied political views are heard. Good ideas from 6 countries that face similar challenges aim at productive solutions in favor of the whole of Europe and not just the South. If South makes it, the whole of Europe makes it. Today's event will run as follows. From the Greek government, we are honored to have here Minister for Development Kostis Hatzidakis. Kostis Hatzidakis is part of the European Parliament family. I recall that he has been elected 3 times to the European Parliament before coming back to Greek politics. The keynote speaker of the event is the European Parliament President Martin Schulz. In February 2012, President Schulz was the first EU leader since the beginning of the crisis in Greece to come to Athens and deliver a message of hope. He has since systematically supported the plea for a European strategy of exit from the crisis that gives due emphasis on growth. Therefore, we are honored and delighted that the President has supported this initiative, and he is here today to address this meeting. After his speech, he will answer questions from the floor. Anni Podimata, Vice President responsible for communications and a protagonist in shaping the European Parliament institutional campaign for the 2014 European elections, will place this discussion in the political context of these elections. Subsequently, 9 European Parliament members and 9 distinguished journalists from the participating countries will discuss in 3 consecutive panels 3 important questions: how to overcome the crisis and launch recovery, how EU policies can fuel growth, how to create more and better jobs. I will be presenting each panel in turn as they come in. Just on a technical note, the event is live-streamed, and we hope that the media and citizens in the 6 countries follow it. The panel discussions will also open to the floor, and those not present can tweet their comments, and moderators will have the capacity to see them there and integrate them in the discussion. The discussion has already started 2 weeks ago with President Schulz and 36 MEPs giving their views in 1-minute videos that you can see in the YouTube, and already a lot of people have. We hope that today's discussion will launch a dialogue in view of the European elections that answers to the concerns and expresses the hopes of the European citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Kostas. I would like now to invite Mr. Kostis Hatzidakis, Minister of Development, representing the Greek government in our event today, to take the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Greek government and the Prime Minister, Antonis Samaras, I would like to welcome all of you here today, especially fellow MEPs and the President of the European Parliament, Mr. Martin Schulz. Welcome, President. Having served as an MEP for 13 years, I had the opportunity to witness great changes in the European Union. I have witnessed a Europe without frontiers, powered by the treaties of Maastricht and Amsterdam. I have witnessed a Europe expanding and building the economic and monetary union. Due to this great progress achieved in a few years, no one could then foresee the major difficulties Southern Europe is now facing. We're now facing the greatest crisis in the history of the European Union because of past failures, mainly structural problems and imbalances that were underestimated. Recession and unemployment shake the foundation of our societies. Crisis is fueling populism, and in our case, the case of Greece, a neo-Nazi party, violence, and even terrorism. In the north, Southern Europeans are accused of being lazy and irresponsible by the populists, while in the south, Northern Europeans are heartless and bossy according to local populists. We must not let populism and isolationism prevail. It's up to us to prove that we're able to overcome national stereotypes, detrimental dogmatism, and lack of political will. For Europe, this is a crucial battle, a battle to preserve the European vision for freedom and prosperity, which was built on the ruins of 2 world wars. European Union is our common home. After all, it has been a win-win situation for all of us, even according to strict economic criteria. For example, Southern European countries benefit from the structural funds. Northern countries have been able to significantly increase their exports through the internal market. All these years, we have created a strong relationship based on common principles and interests. This relationship cannot now end without inflicting great pain. Taking into account the problems emerged in the globalization process, all the countries of Europe, even the largest ones, cannot cope with the modern challenges alone. That is why everyone has to realize that the success of the European South will be a success of Europe as a whole. However, wishful thinking alone cannot solve the crisis. Many people in Greece come up to us and ask, when will the crisis end? Why is the economy not growing? The answer we give is that growth is not something you can dictate, of course. You have to implement specific policies, reforms for a sound fiscal basis and a high competitiveness performance. And allow me to insist that as regards our country, we have already implemented significant fiscal and structural measures. During the last years, and especially after the formation of Antonis Samaras' coalition government, we have accelerated our pace. Our country has now the 5th smallest deficit in the Eurozone and is on track to enjoy primary surplus for the first time in decades. Competitiveness has also been enhanced. Greece improved its ranking by 28 positions at the Doing Business report of the World Bank during the last 2 years. Labor market is not rigid anymore. Pension system has been reformed and several sectors of the economy have been liberalized. But the question remains. Since you are implementing the measures needed, why is the economy not growing? What is the missing link? The answer is not only that some time is needed. The answer is liquidity on the one hand and trust on the other. Completing banks' recapitalization was a necessary step, but not a sufficient condition, because the wound in the banking sector was so deep. In order to restore liquidity, trust is a key factor. As you know, as far as the economy is concerned, psychology matters. A new climate of confidence is vital in order to provide liquidity. We insist that Greece has hit rock bottom and a period of recovery and growth can be close. However, what really matters is not what we believe, but the general perception. Therefore, we now need our European partners to express their confidence in Greece's prospect. Continuous doubt about the economy is a very negative factor. After all, it does not reflect reality and the progress made over the last years. Any punitive approach cannot be helpful. Greece's progress should be recognized, and at the same time, a solidarity approach should become visible to every Greek citizen. We have no illusions, of course. We know that it is vital for us to continue our marathon. On the other hand, solidarity is now more than ever needed by our partners in order to capitalize the progress and improve psychology at this critical turning point. And what applies for Greece, more or less, applies for the other southern countries. Dear friends, blaming each other for past failures is useless and harmful. North and South must proceed together. And there is only one way out, forming a great and solid unity. Unity is the most important factor now. In this context, we ought to put into action new initiatives. We ought to form a common fiscal policy supervised by a central mechanism and accompanied with a real banking union and a European Central Bank with a really reinforced role. At the same time, policies addressing problems, the SMEs, all the vulnerable people, and especially the unemployed, are facing should be adopted and implemented without delay. We have to proceed immediately before the upcoming European elections, and thus to send a message that the answer to the crisis is not less Europe. The answer to the crisis is more and more efficient Europe. Unity will also be the key word of the upcoming Greek presidency during the most challenging European elections. Of course, no one believes that miracles occur. No one believes that a single presidency can bring radical change in 6 months. However, it is an opportunity for Greece to surprise in a positive way, not only by proving that it is back on track, but also by handling European matters and promoting integration and issues like the banking union, migration policy, growth, and jobs. This will be the effort of our government. Ladies and gentlemen, we have proved that we are willing to follow the rules and change. Greece and all the southern countries know that failure cannot be an option. But at the same time, we want all the other European partners to express their trust, to acknowledge the great progress achieved. We have to proceed together. What has been achieved in Athens, in Madrid, in Lisbon, in Rome, in Dublin, in Nicosia, can be capitalized in Brussels as well. Our duty as Europeans is to foster a new era of progress and prosperity for Europe, promoting integration with credibility and solidarity. A few decades ago, there was a separation between East and West. We brought down the walls that divided us. Today, we cannot divide between North and South. Our union can only deepen. We ought to show the whole world that our ideals can still inspire. And as regards the Greek government, let me underline this. We shall do our duty for Greece, for Europe, for the generations to come. We still have some difficulties ahead. We have to overcome certain obstacles. We have to eradicate violence and extremism. We have to complete our efforts: fiscal adjustment, a business-friendly Greece, social cohesion, recovery, and growth. But above all, we all know we are condemned to succeed. This is our duty, and believe me, we'll make it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hatzidakis, dear Minister. I would like now to call for the keynote speech the President of the European Parliament, Mr. Martin Schulz. Mr. President, you have the floor.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, dear colleagues. First of all, of the Greek government, of the Greek Parliament, dear colleagues and former colleagues of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, this is a very important meeting. It is a meeting organized by our information offices in the countries just mentioned: Italy, Portugal, Spain, Cyprus, Greece, the so-called crisis countries. And I want to use this opportunity today to make a proposal. Let's try to discuss from today not to speak about crisis countries. We should speak about future countries, countries with hope, countries with chances, and countries with a commitment to overcome what we call the crisis, what is in reality economically and socially a disaster. And what we must really do is to come to an end with this eternal rhetoric of crisis. I want to open the door, to open a window for a new debate, the debate of hope, the debate of growth, the debate of via growth employment, especially for young people. This is possible. It is a question, yes, you are right, we lost trust. And without trust, no economic growth is possible. Therefore, to regain trust in ourselves, trust in the reality of chances for real growth, this is what we want to launch today with the conference. And as a President of the European Parliament, first of all, thank you very much to the civil servants, to the ladies and gentlemen in our information offices who organized the conference. This is the right way to go. Not to resign and not to retire into depression, not to abandon from the idea that change is always possible. No, the other way around. To say growth for South is the first step in a new direction. And some proposals. I think people are prepared to make sacrifices. Let me tell you a private story. I'm a post-war German. I'm born after the Second World War, and my parents belong to a generation, not only in my country, in Germany, in all countries in Europe, in the time after the Second World War, parents were asked to make sacrifices. Why? They lived in a destroyed continent, in destroyed countries, not only physically destroyed, also from a moral and psychological point of view, destroyed. And they had to rebuild their countries. And they made sacrifices. My parents had the first chance to go to a holiday when my father was 60 years old. But they made it, they did it. Why? Because there was a promise. The governments promised to this generation of parents, you must make the sacrifices for the better of your children. This was what we call in German Leitmotif, the general line the general orientation in the life of my parents was we do what we can to improve the life condition for our children. And visibly, my life, the life of my generation, was in an unprecedented way a life of chances for more education, for better jobs, for better salaries, for the better, and even for my own children. The promise, make the sacrifices and it is for the better of your children, was kept. Europe was a promise. This European cooperation of countries and nations across borders to increase health, to increase wealth, to increase stability, to increase peace, to increase social stability, growth and jobs. The promise was kept. The generation made sacrifices, and visibly the life of their children was better. And what are we doing today? What is Europe doing today? Not only the European institutions, the national governments especially. We are asking sacrifices for people, and we don't care about their children. That's one of the biggest problems in Europe. And therefore, my first proposal is, let's first of all discuss how to overcome unemployment of young people. Let us put employment for young people at the spot in the strategy South for Growth. Whatever we will do to invest in real economy must lead immediately to employment for young people. An unemployment rate of 25, 30 and more percent of perhaps the best educated generation our continent ever had, this is absolutely unacceptable. Therefore, my first proposal is employment of young people must be the first step in our strategy for growth in the south of Europe. My second proposal. When I'm speaking here in Greece, in Italy, in Portugal, in Spain, wherever, and I meet enterprises, I visit enterprises, they all have the same problem. There is not a lack of ideas or of work to do, the other way around. I just met, during my last visit, and I will meet today in the afternoon, Greek entrepreneurs. I met the president of the German-Greek Chamber of Commerce, who showed me a list about 50 to 100 different projects possible to realize in the short term. In tourism, in infrastructure, in research, in development, in services, in the tourism, whatever. Intelligent, convincing, meaningful projects. But the complaint is all over the same, in Italy like in Portugal, in Spain and in Greece. Small and middle enterprises have no access to credits. They can invest if they get money. The credit crunch in Europe, in the southern part of Europe, is one of the most important obstacles we have to overcome, we have to put aside. And from a principled point of view, as a European responsible, as the president of a European institution, I want to raise only one question. How is it possible that the European Central Bank has an interest rate of 0.5%? That means banks can get money for 0.5% from the European Central Bank, and they get the money, but they don't invest and they don't inject the money in real economy. Partially, the banks are taking the money and speculating on international financial places. I think we need a strategy, especially in times of cheap money, 0.5%, that banks who get the money for such an interest rate from the central bank have to inject the money in real economy, and therefore we need a credit program for small and middle enterprises in Europe, because especially small and middle enterprises are those who are creating most of the new jobs. To overcome credit crunch, by the way, also by the European Investment Bank. It's a very important point, and I want to raise here that we just decided to increase the capital of the European Investment Bank by 10 billion euros, which leads to a lending capacity of around 60 billion. But this should not be linked only in the European Investment Bank, which is a public bank, to a strategy of saving the AAA. Then I can also go to a normal bank. We need an investment strategy by public institutions, which is helping to overcome this obstacle, credit crunch, because the moment small and middle enterprises in the Mediterranean and also in Ireland have access to credits to realize their project, I'm quite sure that then they need immediately well-skilled employees. And this is an enormous chance to combine these two things. Fight against unemployment of young people has a precondition, growth. And growth could be generated in the European Union via a fast strategy against this credit crunch. My third proposal, after putting fight against unemployment, especially of young people, at the first place and to overcome this credit crunch, is that we are more courageous. If you look to the map, I must admit Ireland is not yet a Mediterranean country, but looking to the map in the Mediterranean are enormous chances. And my feeling is that we are not courageous enough, that we from time to time have no fantasy. And why I said let's look to the map. In the northern part of Africa are around 300 to 400 million people who came with an enormous movement of courage to an end with the dictatorships there, in Libya, in Egypt, in Tunisia, and I hope soon in Syria. And people who went out to the streets to change their countries, they did it with hope for a better, for themselves and for their children. And what is needed in these countries? Countries in the northern part of Africa need a better infrastructure. Egypt, for example, needs a sustainable water management. They need agriculture. A sustainable agriculture development. No, I have water here, no problem. Wonderful. Now I have two waters. Thank you very much. Really. Prost. Thank you. It was because I spoke about sustainable water management. Thank you very much. They need agriculture, sustainable agriculture development. Providing food to their own people, and let's be honest, a sustainable agriculture production in the northern part of Africa, in the transforming countries, could contribute also to food provided in the Sahel area, which is, by the way, a contribution to lower down hunger and hopelessness in this region, and it is a contribution to manage migration problems for the European Union. They need infrastructure investments in a railway system, in a harbor system, in an airport system, which brings them economically on the level of other partners they need, by the way, on the other side of the Mediterranean. And this is the southern side of Europe. I think the Union for the Mediterranean considered as a neighborhood between Africa and Europe with enormous economic chances, and to invest in the neighborhood, this is a chance for both sides to increase economic growth, employment, and via economic growth and employment, stability, social and political stability. Therefore, I think the Union for the Mediterranean should be taken as serious as a partnership project of the European Union as the Eastern dimension is taken. For the time being, we are on the 22nd of November in Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, gathering as European Union with our Eastern neighbors. For example, to discuss energy security. But energy security via gas and oil is also a question in the Mediterranean. The countries of Northern Africa are energy providers for the European Union. So I think cooperation in the Mediterranean, south for growth, is possible if we are courageous and if we have enough fantasy. For sure, it is not meaningful to send our foreign affairs ministers in the respective capitals of such countries to honor the revolution and to allow them to get back in their respective capitals of the European Union to cut the money for cooperation. This is completely counterproductive. And therefore, my last proposal. I have a lot of other proposals, but limited speaking time. Therefore, my last proposal for today. Putting the fight against unemployment of young people, to overcome the credit crunch, an economic area of cooperation. These are three, in my eyes, in a short term, feasible projects. But what we need as the basis to realize these proposals is to regain trust. We are living in a Europe of mistrust. Minister Hatzidakis, well justified, described we had in former times a division between East and West. Let's avoid a division between North and South. Yeah, you are completely right. And therefore, my appeal to all of us is to stop with this mistrust. People living in the Mediterranean are as efficient, as diligent, as intelligent than people living in the northern part of Europe. Let's be honest. If the criteria, high rate of unemployment, low growth, and an exaggerated sovereign debt are the parameters for Mediterranean countries, then the United Kingdom is a Mediterranean country, but I didn't know that the UK is not in the North Sea. Instead, to be there in the Mediterranean. No, this is nonsense. People here in these countries are as good as people in northern part of Europe. But for sure, we need structural reforms, yes. But for sure, we need reducing of sovereign debt. For sure, we need sustainable management of an exaggerated sovereign debt. But what we need is also a banking union which is stabilizing and not destabilizing the first signals, the first small lights we see at the end of the tunnel. Today, the stock exchanges here in Athens and the stock markets are for the first time relatively positive. The Börse's development here in Athens and in other southern European capitals are positive. Not very good, not yet, but for the first time we have growing figures. And this is another element we should take very serious because it shows trust of investors is coming back. But trust of investors is one single stone in the whole structure. We need one basic element. This is trust of people. Citizens lost trust in their national institutions. Citizens lost trust in the European institutions. But trust is the key word. Trust of investors to invest in a country. Trust of citizens into their own future. How can I expect, as a responsible politician on a national or a European level, that we have a future, a new generation of children, if young men and women will not only not marry, they have not the courage to get children because they have no employment. If they have employment, they have not a decent salary from which they can finance their life, give a guarantee to their partner or to a family of 1, 2, or 3 children. How can I expect that young people invest in their future if they don't know if I get a job, and if I get a job, if I get a salary from which I can live or build a family? Normally, a young generation has trust in the own future. Whatever will be, I trust into myself and in my capacity to realize my dreams and to have a good future. What I'm facing today, especially with young people, is fear, mistrust, and reluctance. But this is destroying the basis of a society. Every society needs especially hope and trust of young people. To regain trust, especially of the young people, this is the first step to regain trust into a country and to regain trust in the future of a country. So therefore, I get back to my first proposal. South for growth means not a future for people of my generation. It means a future of the young generation. And therefore, I hope that the next European Summit, the next European Council will come to meaningful conclusions on the banking union. Why I link the banking union to the question of trust and hope for the next generation? You will raise for sure the question, and my answer is a banking union deserving the name banking union because it is linking the idea of the union, the European Union, with stability of the banking system. means for me to break the spiral, this dangerous spiral of banking debts and state debts. We are living in a moment where countries, even countries who are on the way to regain via trust growth, are threatened that without a banking union, which is stabilizing the banking sector in reality at a short term, the next banking crisis will destroy all the efforts they made in their budgets, all the efforts they made to reduce the sovereign debt and to regain the necessary money to invest also from a state side in growth, from a public budget spending in growth and the fight against unemployment, because the banking debt destroys all the consolidation efforts. Therefore, we must create a banking union after we have now the supervisory mechanism and we have the principal decision to build these restructuring funds, that banks are saving banks instead, countries and citizens are saving banks. We need, in the intermediate time until the restructuring fund is available, a solution breaking this spiral between banking debt and state sovereign debts. And if we achieve until the end of the year to get such a solution, we have one of the most important bases to regain trust, that the banking system is stable enough to inject directly money into real economy. And I repeat, 0.5% costs for them the money in Frankfurt to the central bank. And to get this money and to inject it and to overcome the credit crunch via a renewed trust of the banking system that it is meaningful to invest, and trust of countries that banks once saved will not continue with their uncontrolled speculation. Therefore, by the way, parallel to the banking union, we need more rules and more regulation in the financial sector, which the European Parliament is just on the way to realize in a lot of very important directives we are just discussing and soon adopting. To regain trust is the key. Trust of citizens. And trust of citizens we will not regain by speeches. Trust of citizens we can only regain if we get back the trust and confidence to institutions and to individuals when we deliver solutions. And the proposals are on the table, and the panels today will go deeper into what I described as a general frame. I want, therefore, to conclude with an appeal to all of us. To regain trust means another worrying element. This is violence. What just happened here in this country is not only a point we have to condemn. No, it's not enough. I condemn people who kill other people by whatever reasons. Politically, there is never a justification to kill another one. Whatever may be his position, in a civilized democracy, this is a real signal of alert, a signal of destabilization. The 20th century showed, especially in my country, from which I'm coming, to which extent at the end violence, political violence leads. No, we are a unity of mutual respect. We ask for mutual respect and dignity. Even parties who are denying the respect, even parties who are denying dignity to other people, and they exist. In a democracy, you can't fight with violence. You must fight them with arguments and with concrete actions. Because let's be honest, A lot of those people who vote for these extremist parties are not convinced Nazis, but they are often hopeless people who have, at the end, no hope, who see no chance for themselves and run by hopelessness behind such terrible people. To prevent such a development, the best way is to regain the trust of citizens that they should stick to the idea of democracy, mutual respect. But this is easy for a president of a European Parliament to propose mutual respect, to propose trust. It is very difficult for an unemployed father and mother with unemployed children and no hope for a better. Therefore, to regain trust in democracy, I conclude we need some key steps on a short term which should be discussed and will be discussed today here on the panels in the strategy for what we call South for Growth. Let's put the fight against unemployment of young people on the first place. Parents who see that their sacrifices lead to a better for their children bring the sacrifices. Let's inject money in real economy instead in speculation. 0.5% interest rates must lead to more concrete investment in real economy of especially small and middle enterprises, which are those who create these jobs. And third, let's think bigger. The dimension of the Mediterranean, in cooperation between Europe and other parts, included, by the way, Turkey, is a real economic chance for the 21st century. The Mediterranean could become one of the most dynamic economic regions of the world if we invest in the region. And the fourth point, if we combine all this with a sustainable banking union until the end of the year, I'm sure that we can regain trust and argue in the upcoming European election campaign that people should not discuss about yes or no to the European Union. The European Union will still exist the day after the European election. Those who tell to people, let's come to an end with the European Union, they are telling nonsense. The European Union is there and will exist. Let's discuss during the upcoming election campaign what kind of Europe we want. My proposal and the overwhelming majority of the members of the European Parliament share the view across all these political affiliations, different political affiliations they have in the European Parliament. We need a European Union which continues to work on the basis of the founding fathers and mothers of Europe, that countries and nations across borders cooperate in common institutions to strengthen each other, to support each other, also to control each other, but knowing that together we are stronger than alone. Thank you very much. I stay here at the podium. Okay.
If somebody's
Okay. Thank you very much. In Greece. Yeah, this is the translation. Okay.
Ευχαριστώ θερμά κύριε Πρόεδρε. Thank you very much, President. Now we take almost half an hour for questions. Please be short in your questions and please identify yourself when putting the questions. Mr. Schulz will be with us for this question and answers for approximately 25 minutes. So we should respect this time schedule, please. So please be short and precise. Thank you very much.
I'll stay. Κύριε Σαράντης. Το μικρόφωνο εδώ παρακαλώ.
Mr. President, you mentioned more than 10 times the word trust. Angela Merkel recently noted that there is no automatic linkage between the results of the European elections and the election of the new president of the European Commission. Legally speaking, it seems that she tends to ignore the Article 17 of the Lisbon Treaty, and politically speaking, it seems that she doesn't want to respect the political agreement to give a face to the European elections. What's your comment on that?
You started your question with trust. What is the question of trust? Would you ask me if I trust Angela Merkel or not? Is this the sense of your question?
No. I mean, no. The question is how we will enhance the trust of EU citizens towards the institutions you mentioned before.
Yeah, Angela Merkel expressed. I saw this in some agencies. I have not heard it directly from her. And to be honest, I think the upcoming European election, as I described it, will be a competition between different candidates of the political families for the post of the President of the Commission. And Article 17.7 is quite clear. The Council, to which Angela Merkel and other, Anthony Samaras and François Hollande and Enrico Letta and Mariano Rajoy and Pedro Passos Coelho and Anastasiadis, the president of Cyprus, belong to, speak about the country, and Enda Kenny, the prime minister of Ireland, belong to. This is a round of 28 people. They will make a proposal to the European Parliament after consultation, after they have consulted the Parliament, and taking in account the result of the previous European election. I think the text of the treaty is quite clear. So we will have a competition and we will then have a vote in the European Parliament. That's what belongs to my part as President of the European Parliament. I'm not here in Athens to comment opinions of members of the Council.
Thank you. A question from Cyprus, please.
Mr. President, you said that we have to see the big picture in the south and consider what to do with the Mediterranean and the energy resources. My question is, do you make any recommendations to Greece and Cyprus in relation to the Euro-Turkish relationship and how the Euro-Turkish relationship, you have included also Turkey in the big picture, and how to overcome the current impasse in the negotiations in Cyprus?
Difficult question. The energy question I think the energy question plays, first of all, a very important role on which is concerning the development and the economic chances of Cyprus itself. I think Cyprus is a good example, Greece, by the way, as well, that with a sustainable development and looking to the next 20, 30 years, these are two countries with an enormous chance to become members of the family of important energy providers. And that's one of the reasons why I think there is, one of the points why I think there is no reason to be too skeptic. There is a lot of chances for the future. For Cyprus and for Greece and for Turkey, this is a highly disputed development. The European Union is affected directly because two of the member states of the Union are in a very difficult relationship on which is concerning the Mediterraneans, and the access to oil and gas in the Mediterranean is highly disputed between Turkey and the European Union. My feeling since years is a solution can only be found, first of all, in the relation between the European Union and Turkey. And an element in our relations with Turkey is the solution for Cyprus.
Thank you.
I have no concrete proposal for the time being, except one that I hope that the direct talks could restart. This lack of dialogue during the last 12, 15 months is worrying me a lot. The solution is a solution in very small steps. Precondition is a lot of patience, especially on Cyprus, on the island. And it is quite sure that the economic crisis and the banking crisis in Cyprus was on the first place of the priorities to be solved, and put the Cyprus question a little bit aside. Nevertheless, to come to a peaceful and sustainable development, we need a solution. But if I had a solution, I would put it immediately on the table. One condition is also a clear and a clear position and a constructive position of the Turkish side. And during the last 10 years, there were moments where we were far than we are today, where the solution was nearer than it is today. And I hope that we can find a way for a better and more constructive atmosphere and frame. And therefore, my feeling is the dialogue, a real credible dialogue, must restart as soon as possible.
Next question, please. I try to remember. Gentleman there. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'd like to ask you to recall that after Second World War, Europe was reconstructed based on the American support via the Marshall Plan, and also with financial institutions such as the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development that guaranteed, to a large extent, as a lender of last resort, all the loans to the Mittelstand companies of Europe, especially Northern Europe. Wouldn't you think a proposal to the European Parliament to become the lender of last resort on behalf of the loans that the European banks, investment as well as reconstruction and development, could make to the middle-sized enterprises in the Southern Europe, to the Mittelstands, that create the employment, would be a useful addition to your work? Thank you.
To understand it better, the EBRD as the lender of last resort?
No, behind the EBRD, but Europe as a whole, via a fund, such as like the Marshall Fund, to be the lender of last resort for the Mittelstand development for jobs.
Yeah, you know that we had a huge debate about Euro bonds, which is more or less what you are just describing. But I'm a realist. We will not have in the foreseeable time Eurobonds, and therefore we must look for other solutions. One of the solutions I described in my speech, this is to find an instrument in the frame of banking union as a first step, preventing the debts of banks, especially after we have a supervisory mechanism now with the European Central Bank, starting in a foreseeable time, the so-called stress tests for the banks with open results, but perhaps results showing that banks have still problems. Then we need, until this restructuring fund is available, will last some years, we need an intermediate structure. And how to find such a structure? Stabilizing the development that, or stabilizing countries who are confronted with problems with their banks should not, because banks have problems, put back in this crisis that countries have to save banks. And in the way they save the banks, they are increasing their sovereign debt with all the negative impacts, downgrading and increasing interest rates on the markets. We need a mechanism, and we are discussing such a mechanism. A lender of last resort is then, I hope, not necessary. But to create a lender of last resort behind the institutions we have today, I think this is a very theoretical debate.
Θυμίζω ότι μπορείτε να υποβάλλετε ερωτήσεις και στα ελληνικά. Μην κάνουμε διάλογο, σας παρακαλώ.
The middle stands of the north have ample access to capital. The middle stands of the south have got none. Therefore, a simple balance of equities would be agreeable without a lender of last resort.
I think the so-called macroeconomic unbalances in the European Union, especially in the Eurozone, to overcome it, we need more balanced access to credits. And that's what I mentioned in my speech. But here, different elements have to be combined. The strategy of the European Central Bank with the strategy of the Eurozone and the strategy of the Commission. Therefore, I think our debate today and tomorrow in the European Parliament about the strategy of the Troika and the proposal the Troika has to make is from the highest importance. And very interesting debate you are just opening, but accept please that I will not enter too much in the details publicly for the time being, because I'm the president of a European institution, and I don't want to destabilize. Whatever I would say must stabilize the development, and therefore I'm extremely prudent. Even if you have the feeling the guy tries to escape from the answers I want to listen to, I can understand your feeling, but I ask your understanding that I must be very prudent. Especially lender of last resort. There are some lenders of last resort existing, but I don't mention them.
Κυρία Νικολαίδου και στη συνέχεια ο κύριος Κουμουτσάκος.
Hello. As we are very close to European elections, I would like to ask you, in your opinion, what is the biggest achievement of EU Parliament during the period that you are in lead? What is the biggest failure? And what is the first thing that must change immediately after the elections? Thank you very much.
This is a difficult question. The biggest achievement, we have so long list of achievements, it's European Parliament. I think that these are three packages of achievements, that we brought more order into the financial markets by limiting banker bonuses, that we adopted rules to limit uncontrolled speculation, and that we adopted with an overwhelming majority the Podimata report of Ani Podimata to introduce a financial transaction tax. This is this package on financial questions. One of the biggest achievements of the European Parliament was to protect individual citizens' rights by refusing the ACTA agreement, by rejecting the SWIFT agreement. So the European Parliament is the place where this digital agenda discussed all over in Europe, where the impact on our individual citizens' rights, the best instrument of protection during this period was the votes of the European Parliament, not against the development in the digital world. The other way around, we need, in my eyes, also a single digital market in the European Union, and we need a transatlantic relationship because the digital world is existing. We cannot keep Europe out. The other way around, Europe must invest itself in the digital agenda, but with a clear strategy, and therefore the data protection directive we just adopted in the relevant committee is the third element of achievements by guaranteeing individual citizens' rights in this digital world of the 21st century. These are the two packages where, in my eyes, the European Parliament had enormous achievements. The biggest failure, don't know, listen, if I would ask you what is the biggest failure in your newspaper or in your television station this year, you you would also have difficulties to answer to me. Perhaps there are some people of the European Parliament saying to vote Martin Schulz as the President of the European Parliament is the biggest failure. There are for sure some of my colleagues who are thinking this. It's difficult. We have for sure some failures, but to compare our failures with the successes, we were more successful in this period. What should change in the next period? I think the European Parliament, if we fulfill what is foreseen in Article 17.7, that the next President of the European Commission is not the result of a negotiation of 20 heads of states and government behind closed doors, but the result of a vote of citizens in all countries electing parliamentarians who are voting then with the majority. The highest post of executive in an executive body in the European Union is a dimension of parliamentarism, of new democratization via more parliamentarism in Europe, which is without a precedent. I think this is a kind of constitutionalization of the European Union, and therefore I think the change is that the next European Parliament then has also the duty to support a Commission, or with a minority which is not sharing the view to run against the Commission, because the real change in the dimension is that in such a way an elected President of the Commission represents a democratic decision of citizens. And that should also the European Parliament then take into account.
Mr. Koumoutsakos, member of the European Parliament, please, and then the representative of Rai Television just after.
Good morning, Mr. President. The Cyprus issue was raised, and I would like to come back to it because it's very important. We all agree that a solution is long overdue, and we are ahead in view of a new effort, as you mentioned. I was visiting Cyprus 2 days ago, and I had contacts and discussions with all the key players. One of the issues that comes once and again is the fact that any solution cannot but have a strong European dimension because of the fact that the Cyprus Republic is a member of the Union. And the issue that came in all the discussions that I had with the President of the Republic, with the Minister of Foreign Affairs, is that the Cyprus Republic want to see a strong involvement of the European Union in the new effort. But so far, there have not been no encouraging signals from the European side. And I'm saying this because that was an element missing from your previous answer on this, which is a very crucial issue for the whole of the south of Europe. Thank you.
Dear colleague, you know for sure that I, not only as a president of our institution, also personally, I invested a lot, even in my previous capacity as chairman of a parliamentarian group in the European Parliament, in the Cyprus question. I know from the President of the Republic, I know from his predecessor that the government of the Republic of Cyprus wants to see more European engagement. I can only answer for my institution, not for the other institution. Our institution is investing a lot. And I myself, I repeat it also, I do a lot in the frame of my capacity. Perhaps you make the appeal to other institutions. I can only speak for the European Parliament, I'm afraid. I encourage you to do it.
The representative of the Rai Television here, please. Here in front.
Good morning, Mr. President. Simple question. If you become President of the European Union Commission, will you renegotiate the condition under the Greece is forced now by the Troika? And second question, if you become the president of the European Commission, will you realize what the European Parliament strongly asked for this year, more and more, but the Commission don't hear it's namely concrete action for economic growth, such as Eurobond, project bond, and more and better condition for a very economy and social growth cohesion? Thank you.
I think to your second question, I answered with everything I said in my speech. I think I must not repeat my 4 proposals. This is more or less an answer to your second question. The first question, listen, the overwhelming majority of members of the European Parliament adopted, I repeat, the overwhelming majority, more or less a majority similar to the majority for the report on the financial transaction tax of my colleague Podimata, 550 to 570. This was also a similar majority for the refusal of the multi-annual financial framework. Such an overwhelming majority across political affiliations insisted during the whole period that budgetary discipline is unavoidable and necessary. We must reduce the sovereign debt of the countries, not only the Mediterranean countries, also other countries. By the way, for me, personally, it is a question of solidarity between generations. My parents, as a legacy to me, left not the sovereign debt my generation will leave to my children and their children. We are an aging society. We are becoming, thanks God, older and hopefully with a good health, older, and we have less and less children. And these less and less children have in future times to pay for more and more older children with an enormous sovereign debt. This is not a burden we should put on the shoulders of our children and grandchildren. Therefore, budgetary discipline is unavoidable. But you must not be a professor in economics to understand that you will never rebalance a sovereign debt and the budget without growth and better revenues. Therefore, financial transaction tax was for us a very important point, and I insist that it should come. And another point is, and I can tell here that in the negotiation about a new government in Germany, the introduction of a financial transaction tax is agreed between the negotiating parties as a key point for German strategy in Europe. And the other point with an overwhelming majority is to balance budgets. We must not only discuss about cuts in public spendings, we must discuss about investment, structural reforms for sure, combined with investments in the fight against unemployment. Because the fight against unemployment, it sounds too generally, to make it concrete. That means people have a job and people get a salary. And those who have a job and salaries are consumers. And consumption, the weakness of consumption, domestic consumption, is one of our biggest problems. So the fight against unemployment is a relaunch package for better revenues on the revenue side of the public budgets. This is the strategy we have to go. The combination between budgetary discipline on one hand and fight against unemployment, especially young people, and strategic investment in growth and structural reforms where needed. This is in case I should become President of the European Commission, what I will do. But before, I have to convince a lot of people in 28 member states of the European Union, and you can be sure I will try to do it.
Κύριος στο βάθος.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Stelios Ilignakis. I'm 36 years old, and I'm an insurance broker from Greece. So you've spoken about interest rates of 0.5. You've spoken about speculation and speculators. So what we are seeing here is that markets are doing what they want, and maybe it's a war between markets, financiers, and politicians. So actually, if we don't release funds and money from the markets, and if the politicians doesn't find the regulation to do this, and if the politician doesn't want to do this, then the money won't go, won't reach the people, won't reach the countries. So who is winning this war now, markets or the politicians? I feel that the politicians doesn't have the strength to win this war. So what's your opinion, Mr. President? Thank you.
I would prefer the word war was your choice. So if you consider it as a war, okay. That there is a fight, a power game perhaps, yes, I agree with you. If I would conclude as you, I would perhaps not be a politician. So perhaps a broker in an insurance company. You will perhaps accept if I say that, if my answer is I could not accept your conclusion. If we would lose the fight, if we would say it is useless and we will not fight, then we were really lost. And therefore my answer to you are two arguments. The fight could be lost if the European Union will not stick together. If people achieve to split us, then they can play one country against another, one economy against another. A common European economy, a single market in Europe, 507 million citizens, with, yes, a very unjust distribution of wealth. Some super rich people and more very poor people, this is sure. But the 507 million as a whole are still the richest part of the world, where investments are still interesting. The question is, are we able as politicians to create a frame in which investments for investors are interesting and remain to be interesting, but we achieve nevertheless to distribute the efforts more just? This is the question, this is the challenge. And my feeling is this is feasible. Listen, this argument of big enterprises, of big investors, if you put too much burden on our shoulders, we go away to other parts of the world. This is an argument, I'm in politics since 1974. I remember very well, there were in this time, Helmut Schmidt was the chancellor in Germany, and we had a debate about the increase of the TVA, I think from 7% to 9%. And in these times I was told, if you do it, companies will go to other countries. This is not new. So this is the eternal argument of the capitalist world. If you look severely to us, whoosh, we go away. Therefore, I repeat, no, Europe is a very interesting place of investments. The question is, create we a frame where their investments are interesting, on one hand, but our social dimension is strong enough to balance it. And therefore, as a precondition is unanimity. United Europe, a united European Union, which is not, as the minister just said, divided. A divided union where one country, for example, has 0.0% interest rates and other country pays 5 or 6%. This is not the way we have to go. So I have not abandoned from the idea that we can win the fight. We just adopted in the European Parliament a small example, a regulation and to limit banker bonuses. Only 2 times your basic salary could be an annual bonus for a banker. Yeah, I was told by the whole banking system before, if you adopt this, we will leave. So we have adopted, they are still there. So this is my feeling, we can win the battle.
Young gentleman there. Yes.
Θα ήθελα να καλημερίσω τον κύριο Πρόεδρο και να τον ευχαριστήσω για την αποδοχή της πρόσκλησης σε αυτήν εδώ την ημερίδα που διοργανώνεται. Για το τυπικό της υπόθεσης ονομάζομαι Φώτης Στεγόπουλος και προέρχομαι από το Τμήμα Διεθνών Ευρωπαϊκών Σπουδών του Πανεπιστημίου Πειραιά. Θα ήθελα να ρωτήσω τον κύριο Πρόεδρο, επειδή είναι ευρέως διαδεδομένος ευρωσκεπτικισμός και παράλληλα φαίνεται να υπάρχει μία σύμπλευση από την κυρία Μαρί Λεπέν του Εθνικού Μετώπου και τον κύριο Νάιτζελ Φάρατς από τους Βρετανούς φιλελεύθερους, εάν πιστεύει ότι το αναπτυξιακό πλάνο το οποίο υιοθετεί είναι το κατάλληλο για την αντιμετώπιση αυτού του ευρωσκεπτικισμού που είναι ευρέως διαδεδομένο στις μέρες μας. Και δευτερευόντως θα ήθελα την άποψή του σχετικά με την κρίση χρέους στην Ευρωζώνη, η οποία είναι ένα επίσης επίκαιρο θέμα για την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση. Ευχαριστώ για την προσοχή σας.
I'm a little bit astonished about the question. I tried to answer by making a reference to my previous answers, on which is concerning the sovereign debt crisis. I made a lot of observations, and I can repeat it once more in a short way. Without better revenues, without growth and strategic investments, we will not get rid of the sovereign debt crisis. And then the second element, we must break this spiral between banking debts and state debts. This is the biggest challenge on a short term for the time being. So I hope this is an executive format of my longer previous answers. The way to fight against Euroscepticism is to fight for Europe and to fight for the idea of Europe. These people you mentioned, who tell to their people, Mr. Farage, for example, you mentioned, or Marine Le Pen, they are telling to their people, listen, the European Union, this is nonsense. Nationally and alone, we are stronger. This is in the world of the 21st century not the truth. The truth is that we are competing as European Union with, for example, China or India. China and India are neighbor countries. China has 1.3 billion inhabitants. India has 1.1 billion inhabitants. These two countries together, emerging powers, China is already a world power, have a third of world population. My country, Germany, I'm not speaking about France, not speaking about UK. I speak about my country, Germany, has 82 million inhabitants. This is a bigger province in China. So how can we tell to citizens, alone we can compete in the 21st century, other parts in this economic competition in which we are living? We are not only in the internet living in a global village, we are living in the real economy in a global village, where we are challenged as Europeans. How we can manage this challenge alone? People who are telling to their nation, alone we are stronger, let's get rid of the foreigners, they are playing the future of the next generation. Therefore, my fight is the best way. Nevertheless, we are in a deep crisis, and in a crisis of social justice. Yes, we are in a crisis also of social justice. Between countries and within the countries, we have to improve the distribution of wealth to regain social justice and balance. Yes, this is true. We are in a deep crisis, but I insist the best idea of Europe in the 20th century, especially in the second half, as an answer of the first half, with the First World War and the Second World War, and all this killed people, 70 million victims. The best answer to this was that countries and nations, instead to run against each other, that countries and nations across borders, economic borders, physical borders, linguistic borders, cultural borders, cooperate together in common institution, because our founding fathers, they knew already, together in the 21st century, we are stronger than alone. Therefore, the best way to fight against these people is more social justice and the courage to defend this wonderful idea of European cooperation.
Should we go to the very last question of the young lady there and then finish?
Okay, last one.
The last question to the young lady there, please.
This is
yes.
Good.
Last question.
Thank you very much for your speech. I'm a senior school student, and I'd like to pose a question that's a little bit different to the others, not that much financial related. But you kept on speaking about a crisis which is both a financial and, most importantly, a social disaster. And you also spoke about the fact that we need to be united. And for us to be united, we need to believe in our society as a society, and then in the fact that societies can work together. But right now, our societies are broken. There is no ethos, there is no altruism, we're more ego-centered, and the more the crisis deepens, the more we're interested in our own survival. Right now, if you ask me, I'd say that education is what we need in order to learn that we need to work together, exactly as you said. But right now, in my country, people are getting fired, and less funds are invested in education than what they should. And my question to you is, what are we supposed to do as 17 years old, and you yourself, to change that? Because even if we change the financial facts, as you said, our societies still cannot work together.
First of all, I think in France, one of the biggest problems is this unfair competition by low salaries in other countries. So, you know, I was a long time the mayor of a city in Germany, twin city with a Breton city, Morlaix, where I used to have my best friends until today in France, and I know the situation in Brittany very well. And that the first step, so it was your question to me, and I will give you an advice to your question, what you should do. What I can do and what we can do as European parliamentarians and what the European institutions must do is, as fast as possible, to adopt rules against these walking people around Europe who are, by the way, by the enterprises paid with low salaries of €3 and even less, in slaughteries, for example, in Germany, which are not employees. They are not employed. We have rules against a race to the bottom on salaries by this posted workers directive. But now we have a Europe of ambulant small enterprises, one-man enterprises. These people are making contracts, subcontracts with contractors, and they are working on their own, not as employees. This is slavery. This is a kind of slavery that people have to sell their working power, not as employees, as one-man enterprise, and for the hour they work, they get €3, from which they have to pay their assurances, their apartment to live in, which is, by the way, quite impossible. And this is destroying, in France and in other countries, the social system, because those who respect salaries and pay decent salaries are not longer competitive. The first step to fight against this development in France is that we have a directive in Europe against such unfair competition with this walking ambulant one-man show enterprises. I'm prepared to do the utmost to adopt such a rule on a European level directly. What you could do is to support people who are thinking in such a direction and to discuss in France one thing. I'm very, very carefully with what I say now, but not every reform is immediately a strike against the Republic. So in France, often the smallest step is already taken in a very controversial way. France, as all the European countries, need more social justice and a better distribution of the of the wealth in the country, that's for sure. But we need, on a European level, your support to put the European frame we need for social well-balanced reforms all over in Europe, included in France. So my request to you is support in the European election campaign, a center-right or a center-left, whatever party, but don't support those people who are telling to the French that they alone are stronger than all the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry that we cannot go on with this very interesting discussion, question and answers to the President, but we shall have the opportunity to discuss further with the panelists. I would like now to call the Vice President of the European Parliament, Mrs. Anni Podimata, responsible for communication, to take the floor. Please, Mrs. Podimata.
Dear President, dear ministers, dear colleagues from the European Parliament, from the National Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, obviously this event is already a great success, and firstly I would like to warmly congratulate our Athens Information Office, the head of our Athens Information Office, Leonidas Antonakopoulos, and our press officer, Konstantinos Tsoutsoplidis, for this exceptional initiative. We are fully aware of the huge work that they've done together with their counterparts from the information offices in Cyprus, Italy, Portugal, Spain, and Ireland. This is exactly the type of initiatives, the type of actions. This is exactly the way we should move forward, as the President pointed out just before, in the context of our institutional campaign for the elections of May 2014. If we want to raise awareness among the European citizens less than 7 months before the elections, which, as we all know, will take place in a very difficult political, economic, and social environment. This joint initiative, South for Growth, certainly doesn't intend to reproduce divisions and odious stereotypes that we've witnessed during the crisis. It seeks to contribute to exactly the opposite, to underline that we need a sustainable recovery across Eurozone, across Europe. Growth and job creation across Europe. And that means convergence, cohesion, and reduction of all kinds of inequalities across Europe, between and within the different member states. Nowadays, this seems to become more and more a mainstream approach, but we should keep in mind, we should remember that we have been through some very difficult moments where very few people had the courage and the leadership to defend these views, and among them, the President of the European Parliament, Martin Schulz. Ladies and gentlemen, from the very beginning of this crisis, the European Parliament is underlining that only the one-sided austerity policies cannot lead Europe out of the crisis. That we need a combination, a balance between fiscal consolidation measures and concrete targeted policies for growth and jobs. And this is not just words. We fought in the European Parliament for a growth-friendly fiscal consolidation. We fought for longer consolidation periods, for the consideration of the social dimension and consequences, social consequences of the adjustment programs, for tackling macroeconomic imbalances, not only in the deficit, but also in the surplus countries. Talking about raise awareness, allow me to put you two questions. Firstly, how many people in Europe you believe that are aware that it is thanks to the European Parliament that the threshold of guaranteed deposits across Europe raised in the last 2 years from 20,000 euros to 100,000 euros? How many people do you think are aware that thanks to European Parliament pressure, we can now exercise some kind of control and evaluate the way the credit rating agencies function? How many citizens are aware that it is thanks to the European Parliament, Martin Schulz just underlined it, that we've managed to put fair caps in the bonuses of the bankers? In short, acting as the chamber of EU citizens, I believe that the European Parliament has won some significant battles. Of course, to win the war, we need, above all, the active participation of people of Europe. Nothing can be done if people stand skeptical or even against the European project. We know that we have to work hard to regain their trust. We know that we need to improve democratic accountability and transparency in the European decision-making process. To do so, we must convince citizens that their participation matters against today's strong and, I would say, legitimate popular perception that the EU decision-making system is a closed-doors procedure. And allow me to say that this is the mother of all fights for the European Parliament and for its president, Martin Schulz, all these years. Allow me to remind that the Parliament was the first to react against intergovernmentalism, underline constantly that the only method that can guarantee efficiency, equality, fairness, and accountability on the decision-making process is the community method, the only method that promotes and preserves the common European interest and not the short-term national interest based on the balance of power between the different member states at any given time. And although there is still a long way to go, the Parliament has managed to raise the issue of democratic legitimacy and accountability, especially in the architecture of economic governance in the Eurozone. And something even more important for the countries of the South, the democratic accountability and legitimacy in the adjustment programs implemented in the countries that are facing difficulties. You certainly know that Troika is arriving today in Athens. Probably they've already arrived, I don't know. Nevertheless, there will be discussions tomorrow, hopefully constructive and of a good faith from both sides. What you probably don't know is that simultaneously with the talks in Athens tomorrow, we in the Parliament, in the Economic and Monetary Committee, we will hold a hearing with representatives of Troikas entitled Successes and Failures in Crisis Countries of the Troika Programs in Europe. And that's because we want to establish a regular dialogue with representatives of the three Troika institutions, with IMF, of course, on an informal basis, and by doing so to increase accountability as well as the dialogue between institutions and representatives of the citizens. We also decided, the President mentioned it, I suppose it's going to be formal in a couple of days, to initiate an inquiry in the form of an initiative report on the procedures followed so far by Troikas and on their results. We don't intend to become or to act as a court, but we certainly want to make suggestions on improving the effectiveness and the efficiency of these programs. And to our view, to the Parliament's view, this passes through the respect of the democratic fundamentals in the process of designing and implementing the economic adjustment programs. Ladies and gentlemen, the message of our institutional campaign, summarized in the baseline message, act, react, impact, δράσε, αντίδρασε, επίδρασε, όπως το λέμε στα ελληνικά. This is an open and powerful invitation to EU citizens to become agents of change. This campaign, as you know, is a strictly neutral and non-partisan awareness-raising campaign on the Parliament's powers and influence. It is a campaign which will set the scene for the proper political campaign led by the political parties. And as the voice of the European citizens in the EU decision-making process, we do want the people of Europe to be back in the driving seat of power and thus strengthen European democracy. This time is different, as our baseline says. It is different not only because the crisis created a different environment and revealed existing problems, existing deficiencies that for years we were avoiding to cope with. This time is different also because for the first time EU voters will be able, through the choice that they will make in the elections, to influence directly the appointment of the new president of the European Commission, and that means the head of Europe's executive. And this is something that counts and promotes European democracy. Two Greek words, European democracy, of a fundamental significance, I believe, for our project. So, allow me to conclude with another Greek word, a word very much used within and for the southern countries in the years of crisis. And this is the word χρέος, and that means debt, as you know. But χρέος means also duty. not only depth, if we translate it from Greek to English. So I would like to conclude by underlining that it is our duty, είναι χρέος μας, to achieve an unprecedented degree of honesty and clarity in our words and pledges, an unprecedented degree of consistency between our words and deeds, if we want to regain citizens' trust and if we want to obtain their active realignment to one of the most fabulous historic European achievements, the project of European integration. Thank you very much.